Yeah, and just we're getting to time, so could I start by asking people a question and just asking how long people have been using computers and the internet? And just to give you a sort of a starter, I started by selling computers back in 1994, and I got my first dial-up internet connection in 1999. So quite a while ago now.
Wow, Kevin,
And if people wouldn't mind just popping something in the chat panel to give us an idea of the experience that they've got, that would be great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, that's brilliant. It looks like most people can actually hear us. We're getting some interesting. 1996. Someone beats me on the internet front there. 20 years came. Yeah. Okay, that's all good. Excellent. That means that we've got the right sort of people on here, people that are used to using computers and the internet. And I want to talk about how we teach people that are kind of new to this sort of thing, that we've been around for so long, and how do we try and put ourselves back into their shoes. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to start with some road signs. And so hopefully some of the people on today's webinar can drive, and hopefully some of these road signs will be familiar. So let's start, and if you don't mind, just pop into the chat panel what these road signs mean for us. Let's start with a nice easy one to get us going. And who's going to be first to come in with what this road sign is? There you go. Emma's beat us all to it. Kim's there. Yeah. Everybody's happy with this one. And what about this one? And I know I've probably just I've probably got a bit of a problem. Stop and apply the handbrake. Yeah, stop. Everybody wants to stop. It's technically the highway code says it's stop and give way. And Aniela, I quite like having been in the car with you a couple of times. I think you should pay attention to that one a little more often. What about this one? Any ideas on what this one is? Now we might find out where people have been. Yeah, some people have actually. Maybe this presentation's been used before, so people haven't spotted it. It's a bed and breakfast. It's actually from Canada, that one, and it does mean that there's a bed and breakfast nearby. So let's move on. Let's move into the good old US of A. Any thoughts on this one? Uh, oh, Chris is just about there, actually. This is where a highway with a central divider, where the central divider ends, and it goes back to being sort of two-way traffic on the road. So that's yeah, we're getting into slightly more difficult territory. And what about this one? I'll give you a clue here. This one's from Japan. Um, what do we think that one is? Excellent, Emma. Yeah, yeah. This is actually to sound your horn. So Neil, again, I think Neil must have been sort of. I think he's done something with road signs in the past because he's been very close on all of them. So yeah, sound your horn. I wouldn't have got that one. I think we all started to find some of those a little bit more difficult towards the end. So why is it that we find those more difficult? So there's a Yes, some cultural things, some unfamiliarity. That's right, Chris. Some of them it's the context. So if we were driving down the road in Pennsylvania and we saw that sign, we might notice that the central divider was ending at that point. Uh, it is. It's what we get used to. It's what we're ingrained with. So there's a few things sort of going on there, but there's some of the things that are mattering to us. And obviously, when people are new to the internet, there's seeing things that are unfamiliar to them. So uh, someone mentioned to me the hamburger menu about 6 months ago, and it took me a while to realise what they were talking about. Was that those three lines at the corner of the screen where you get a drop-down menu? So, um, what about what the internet's like when you're new to it? Now, I'd like someone to suggest to me a website that they show to people when they're sort of introducing them to the internet the first time. Is there a particular website that people like to use? Is there one that a lot of us are familiar with using with people? Okay, BBC, that's a good one. Oh, a lot of people going with the BBC. Okay. Um, I hadn't prepared the BBC, but if you just give me 2 seconds, I will get the BBC up on this device that I'm going to use. And I thank you, Kim, for suggesting Learn My Way. That's clearly going to be a popular choice here.
VoiceOver on. Safari. Cookies on the BBC website. Heading level 2. Cookies on the BBC website. The BBC has updated its cookie policy. We use cookies to ensure that we give you the best experience on our website. This includes cookies from third-party social media websites if you visit a page which contains embedded content from social media. Such third-party cookies may track your use of the BBC website. If you continue without changing your settings, we'll assume that you are happy to receive all cookies on the BBC website. However, you can change your cookie settings at any time. Continue. Button. Change settings. Link. Find out more. Link. Homepage. Visited. Link. BBC. Banner. Landmark. Accessibility links. Heading level 2. Skip to content. Link. Accessibility help. Link. Sign in. Link. Notifications. Link. News. Link. BBC. Navigation. Landmark. Sport. Link. Weather. Link. More. Link. Search
No,
the BBC. BBC.
I'm actually going to
Navigation.
pause that there.
Search the BBC. Voiceover off.
So my point with that was using the BBC website with a screen reader, so VoiceOver on an iPad. Um, did everybody sort of get how much information was actually coming through there? And although that's using a VoiceOver, a screen reader, that kind of gives those of us that don't usually use that an idea of what it's like when someone looks at a website that's never seen a website before. There's so much information there, and actually, which are the bits that we actually need? When someone showed me that or used that with me just a week or two ago, I found myself sort of realizing how much you actually filter out when you're using the internet. So it makes it quite clear how much information overload can be happening when people start to use the internet. So one more thing before I get into my suggestions of how we can try and help people get over these problems and start using the internet. What are some of the ways that we describe the internet? So if we're talking to somebody about it and we haven't actually got the internet available to show someone, what are the things that we'd say about it? How would you describe the internet to someone? I can see multiple people are typing, and I've given you a bit of an essay question. Collections of information. Emma, like an encyclopedia, but with lots of opinions and views. Information. Yeah, huge library with different information. Yeah, okay. Uh, I think we all use some of these kind of ways to describe things, and some of the things that I wanted to sort of pick out here, and I kind of expected people to say is when we talk about a library or an encyclopedia or information, what are other people's understanding of those words? Um, I I maybe wasn't the uh, I was reasonably academic at school, but I maybe went a little bit off the rails. And if someone talked to me about an encyclopedia, I just have visions of big dusty tomes that are really hard to sort of work your way through and find things. Um, a huge library. Yeah, I might have got kicked out of a library or two in my teens. And maybe that's not something that I'm going to be that comfortable with if you tell me that's what the internet's going to be like. So, yeah, just sometimes the words that we use can conjure up things for other people that we don't necessarily think of. So, anyway, thank you all very much. You've all been really good, and I've forced you to do far more typing than I think you probably expected to. Uh, and actually, I'm just going to, before I move on to my 3 point plan, Hillary has just posted in there, describes it as a big department store. Depends on the individual. Yeah, that's really a key thing is actually thinking about the individual. If you described it as a department store to Aniela, she would love it. If you described it as that to me, maybe not so much.
I
Uh,
was, Kevin,
so,
you honestly read my mind there because I was just about to type in and say Hillary. That would work for me,
yeah.
completely. But I like the fact that what you're saying is you make it personalised, so it depends on the individual, and that's then how you then describe it based on that. So yeah,
Mm.
I remember that one.
Okay, so anyway, here is my pitch to you, and I've got I've got 17 minutes left, so I'm going to try and sort of get through all of these 3 points and make them all meaningful to you. So these are my 3 points for how we can try and get over these issues that we're having when we're talking to people that are new to the internet. So let's start with questioning people, and for me questioning people is it's about finding what's going to really motivate them to actually use computers and the internet, and not always going with the most obvious thing. So I've got a story here. So back in Get Online Week 2012, we went down to a local uh, Weatherspoons, and there was a lovely sort of mixed group in there. We had a couple of volunteers that came along from the university for the day to try and help people get online. And there was a lovely little old lady that was there, and she'd been talking to one of the volunteers, sat in front of a laptop without touching it for about 10 minutes or so. And I kind of thought, that doesn't look like it's going quite as well as it could. So I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna try and sort of help and try and sort of move things along. So I sat down with them, persuaded the volunteer to go and get us both a cup of tea, and started talking to this little old lady. And I asked about the things that she liked doing, and one of her favourite things was Downton Abbey. Now, as she said it, my brain started to go, oh, we could show her ITV player and then she'll be able to watch every episode of Downton Abbey that she wants to. It'd be like having the box set. She's going to be very happy. But I managed to hold back before I actually made the suggestion, and I asked her if she watched it every week, and she really lit up, and she told me about how she made sure that she was always home and she'd never missed an episode. She'd watched every single episode of Downton Abbey. And that made me sort of take pause and thought, well, if I tell her about ITV Player, what's the benefit? She can watch things that she's already seen, so that's maybe not quite as exciting as it could have been. So I asked her about what else does she like to do, and she told me that she liked Alfie Boe. Now, when she said that, I had no idea who Alfie Boe was. But fortunately, there's this wonderful thing called the internet where we can find out things like that. So by this stage, I'm really keen to get her actually touching the laptop in front of her, and we'd already got a browser open, and the address bar at the top was highlighted as if the volunteer had been hoping to get her to type something in. So I just asked her to type Alfie Bowe's name. So I didn't try to take her to Google or anything like that. Just type Alfie Bowe. And obviously, the browser does everything for you. At that point, it does a nice internet search. I discovered that Alfie Bowe was a singer. We've got a couple of YouTube videos that were there in the search results that we could listen to him. And the most useful thing for me was that there was actually an Alfie Bowe concert coming up in Sheffield that week, and the fifth link down was for StubHub, and it said, "Get your Alfie Bowe concert tickets now." And before I'd actually said anything else to her, she'd pointed at that point on the screen and said, "How do I do that then? Because I'd love to go and see him." And that was the thing. Suddenly she wanted to use the internet because she could see a benefit. She could see something that she'd be able to do that she'd not been able to do without the internet. So that for me is the key, is to ask those sort of questions, talk to people, keep talking to them, and keep asking things until you get to something that they're not going to be able to do without using the internet. And that will really, it moves all of the barriers for you when you get to that point. Uh, have people come across that sort of thing before? Anyone done something similar? Or
Kevin, I've had a few similar situations like that. Um,
yeah,
the last one I remember was Benidorm. A couple in Leeds Library actually, and that was their hook, was to book their holiday to the hotel that's on Benidorm.
that that tells us something about many
It was
things.
fun there. It was fun.
Yeah,
They were reading
yeah,
reviews. We went on TripAdvisor.
yeah. But that's the thing, isn't it? That's what they wanted to do. So getting them to what they wanted to do is really the key. Yeah, it opens their eyes. That's the phrase, Emma. Thank you. So let's start to move on to the next part of my 3 point plan, and this is about making things easier. So uh, yeah, when we sort of talked about a website that we use with people, a lot of us talked about how we'd go to BBC. And BBC is a wonderful website, but there is quite a lot going on that front screen when you first come to it, and there's a lot of it that actually the first time you come to it can be quite daunting. So you probably heard the first sort of 20 or 30 seconds of the voiceover was talking about the cookie policy. And little things like that can actually make it quite difficult for people that are new to the internet to really understand how quick and easy it can be. So my point here is let's have a think about things before we actually take people to websites. So Learn My Way, someone mentioned, and we do try to keep a very minimal amount of things actually showing up on the screen when people first get to the website with Learn My Way. I have to say, after we did the voiceover exercise last week in the office, we maybe need to think about what else we have further down that web page that's not actually on the screen, because all of it becomes part of the website when you use a voiceover. Um, but yeah, the first time that you actually use a website, maybe, I mean, Google actually has more on there than you think. Everybody thinks of Google as just being one search box, but actually, there's a few links at the top of the page, and sometimes people need a little bit of explanation of what those things are and why they don't need to look at them. One of the things that we do a lot when we're looking at websites, and you don't even realize you're doing it if like me and like yourselves, you've been using computers and the internet for a long time, is you actually you skim over so much information. There's so much going on a website like the BBC that you learn to scan down the page and look for the key things that matter to you. So if I'm going to the BBC website, I'm maybe wanting to go to the sports page to check what Doncaster Bells are doing this week. And so I would look across all of those things on that first page, and I just look for sport. And then when I get to the sport page, there's quite a lot. So I'll scan over and I'll look for football. And when I get to the football page, I'll scan down the page looking for women's football because I've got used to that method of sort of scanning and delving into things. And if people are new to the internet, that's one of the things that they need to learn how to do. And obviously, the less that they need to scan out of their field of view, the easier that's going to be. So, yeah, learn my way in Google. I find those probably sort of the better ones. We did some work up in Sharrow quite recently with a group of people that had English as a second language, and we found that for them, uh, having too many words on the screen at once. So when we got to the email part of the course that we were doing, some people looked at Google's email and some people looked at Yahoo, and just the homepage for Google and for Yahoo. There's so much more going on the page with Yahoo. Actually made it quite difficult for them to find where the email service was. Any other sort of good websites that people know for actually showing less to people to make it easier for them to see? Yeah. There's not an awful lot. Kim's typing. Let's see if Kim's got something that's good for us all.
I was going to say, Kevin, it's a good question, that isn't it? Because it
Mm,
is actually quite difficult, isn't it, to get websites where they are very clean,
yeah.
simple. And obviously, it's
There's
getting better.
there's a tip for the email. Yeah, GMX. I've not seen GMX, but there you go. That's maybe a good idea. Uh, Shopping sites. That's a good point, Emma. So in the past, a lot of the time we've looked at um, things like Amazon for shopping. And actually, when you look at Amazon, there's lots and lots of links and different sections of their website. So that's not so good. But yeah, John Lewis, that's not a bad shout at all. Yeah, yeah,
To tell you
very
what,
good.
Kevin,
I will remember John Lewis and keep that in mind.
I was going to
Um,
say a government
John
web.
Lewis as a website rather. Apple. Yeah, not thought of Apple. Okay, that's all good. So the third point, and I on my slide of the 3 points, this point was uh, going with small chunks. And Neil, there you go. Citizens Advice. There's a top tip for everybody that wasn't from Citizens Advice that joined the webinar. Uh, so small chunks, um, building up from a very sort of small base can really be a good point for a lot of our learners. So again, going back to that group that we went to up in Sharrow, which is just near Sheffield, we started right back at the basics and started with how to hold a mouse, how to find keys on the keyboard. We went back to the 2012 Get Online Week game of just your type, just to sort of make sure that people could find their way around the keyboard. And at times when you're used to using computers and the internet a lot, it can feel that you're going over simple. But remember, when people haven't used computers and the internet before, there's probably no such thing as over simple. And when they learn how to hold a mouse and they learn how to double click and select something, um, that might not seem like a lot to someone that's used computers for 20 years, but for someone that's used computers for 20 minutes, that's a huge step forward. And again, I mentioned there that we used Just Your Type. Using those sort of services, things that do cut down on the things that you're working on. So we used Just Your Type for the keyboard, and we watched how people moved through that, and actually had some people do that 2 or 3 times. But people that actually moved through it very quickly and found things, we gave them a short piece of text to type into a word processor for more keyboard practice. We really went back old school uh, for the mouse practice. We thought about using solitaire for mouse practice, but actually we'd need to teach them how to play solitaire because culturally it's not something that they've done before. So we actually went with the stickman activity, which was quite interesting because we managed to get the first couple of steps done all right, but then it asked for a grate or a drain, I think it was, and actually trying to explain what a drain was became a bit more difficult. We actually spent more time teaching people how to draw things than we did actually practicing the mouse. But just trying to keep to sort of one thing at a time and sort of building people's confidence up by just getting one thing right before we moved on. Does that sound like something that you guys are already doing? I'm kind of hoping that most of you guys are kind of used to doing this sort of thing. But I sometimes feel that it's worth sort of coming back and reiterating and reminding ourselves that certainly that's what I wanted to do when we went out to Sharrow, was just to remind myself of what that's like. So those are my 3 top tips to make sure that we build up from small chunks, that we try and make things easy for people wherever we can, and that we really talk to people and get to know them so that we can really find their motivation, find their benefits, and inspire them to get online. That's all from me, but I'm quite happy for any questions, any thoughts that people would have at this point. As I say, we've just been out there doing this in the wild, so feel free to pick my brains.
Thanks, Kevin.
Assuming you can find them.
Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, sorry, you can hear me, Kevin.
Yes.
Okay. I've got a question for you around. So once you get people engaged and inspired, so they want to get going, how do you keep
Yes.
them motivated and as they're on that journey? Because obviously, like you say, they're learning so many new things, and if they're starting from scratch, it can be. How do you kind of keep them motivated to continue to get to where they need to be?
Okay, that's a real good one, and it kind of ties in with Neil and talking about the biggest barriers to gaining confidence. So I've just talked about sort of starting with sort of small things and keeping things simple to start with, and that's definitely one of the things. Is making sure that people think even after sort of the first session that they can do something that they couldn't do before. So having some really sort of basic, simple things in your back pocket to say that people can do. Clicking, dragging, double clicking sort of might be the first thing if people have never used a mouse or keyboard before. If they're maybe a little bit more familiar with technology, or maybe they're using tablets, then opening apps and things like that. One of the things that can work quite well, and it does depend on the time that you have available with people, and it does depend on the individual, because not some people can be switched off by this approach. So if, for example, the lovely lady that I'd come across that wanted to be able to buy the Alfie Bow tickets online. Well, to be able to buy Alfie Bow tickets online, she's going to need to be confident with actually shopping online. So she's going to need to be able to use a card to make a purchase. So she's probably going to need to think about the security of the websites that she's using. She's probably going to have to register with the website that we actually buy tickets from, which means she's probably going to have an email address, which means she's going to have to register with an email provider, which means she's going to need to be able to navigate between different websites and different tabs. So there's actually quite a lot. Now, I'm not suggesting that we would give her the full list of all of those things that we need to do before she's going to be able to buy the tickets, because that's probably going to put her off, because that list is going to look quite long. But we could maybe pick out some of the key things. So she's going to need to be able to use the mouse and keyboard. She's going to need to be able to use the navigate the internet, and she's going to need to be able to set up an email account. So that would be kind of 4 things, and that still looks a lot. But then, while we're there at that first sort of taster session, you can say to her, right, okay, so get a hold of the mouse, move it around. You see the arrow moving on the screen. Let's move that arrow to those blue words and just press this button on the left-hand side 1 time. Okay, now you've got to the StubHub website. Fantastic. So this is a busy website and there's a lot going on, but we'll help you just find the thing that you need, and we'll find the Alfie Bow concert on that page, and we'll move the arrow down, and we'll maybe have to do some scrolling to get there, and we'll click that, and she can read about the details and find out the price of the tickets. And there, in sort of 10 or 15 minutes, we can actually say to her, so this was the list of things that we need to be able to do to get these tickets. And actually, you've been navigating a website already, so we can tick that one off. And you're using the mouse, so we can tick that one off. So actually, you're 2/5 of the way. Now, actually, I've filtered the full steps of the way, but we're actually saying that you're 2/5 of the way. And now you're feeling that actually, it's not too far. You've actually, in 20 minutes, you've ticked 2 things off, and you've only got 3 or 4 more things to be able to do. So that can work. It's not perfect, and it's not going to work for everyone, but actually giving people, some sort of idea of the things that they're going to need to be able to do, and some of the steps that they've already taken can be a big thing. Chris has pointed out motivation approach different if beginners are online through necessity, not interest. Yeah, and Hillary has made that point as well. Okay, people sort of being under threat of sanctions. Now, in these situations, I have to sort of fall back on something that I've come across in one of our better centres. And for them, they need people to sort of, in this sort of situation, they need to trust and believe in them. You need to be on their side, and that will help to sort of keep them motivated to come and work with you to actually try and help them. So the really good centre that I came across, what they actually do was they do that sort of breaking down of the things that people need to be able to do to reach the goal that they need, whether it's applying for a number of jobs or registering for the Universal Job Match Service. But they've also approached the local job centre and actually got email addresses for some of the advisors there, and they will take that list and they'll type it up and show people that they're doing this and email it to the job centre saying, this person has actually got all of these skills that we need to work on. That's not something that they're going to be able to fix this week. This is the plan that we're laying out, and they're going to need to do this week and this next week, and then they'll be at a point where they can actually do that thing that you've asked them to do. You do need to build up the relationship with the job centre, and I'm not going to pretend that that's always easy, but if you send that to the job centre, it becomes quite difficult for the job centre to apply a sanction before that period has uh, uh, broken down. It does mean that the learner that you have with you has to actually come back and maintain the plan, because the job centre will chase you up to make sure that they are doing that. Um, uh, but if you can sort of build up that trust and show that you're on that person's side, it can really help to make sure that they do sort of buy into the plan and the approach that you're actually laying out. Uh, yeah, Hillary. Yeah, if they're on threat of sanctions that day, I cannot promise that approach will work. But hopefully, we're getting people referred to us before we get to quite that point. Emma, a lot of people now forced online tutor service becoming online. A lot of people don't want to. The approach needs to be. Yeah, you do need to be really supportive with people. Where I live, um, one of the key things is banks switching to online services and closing branches. The the local village to me used to have three different banks and now has none, and it's a 7 mile journey for people, and certainly uh, uh, for people that have sort of mobility issues, that causes a huge issue. Um, yeah, and you've beaten me to the to the crux of the matter there. Yeah, actually, um, if these organisations have moved out of an area that you're working in, put some pressure on them. Maybe don't talk about it in quite that way, but go to them and see if you can sort of get some volunteers. Lloyd's Banking Group, which is Halifax, Lloyd's, and the third one whose name I always forget, Bank of Scotland, Royal Bank of Scotland, whichever one it is. Digital Eagles from Barclays. A lot of them do have sort of volunteering programs, and because they know that they'll have customers in those areas that are struggling, they probably will want to come in and help. We are running a little over, so I'll just wait for Mark to finish. Ideas for learners with tremors can make using the mouse impossible. Yeah. Now, Mark, uh, I pointed out I'd actually started selling computers back in 1994, and this is one time where that actually comes in useful, because back in 1994, the mouse was actually just being introduced and wasn't always the most reliable thing. So back then I learned to navigate with the keyboard, um, which is it's an acquired skill and it does take a while to get used to. But you can actually on a Mac, on a PC, you can actually navigate the operating system and websites using the keyboard. Mostly it's done through sort of tab, and then either select things with enter, or sometimes with the space bar. Uh, it's not easy. You do have to learn the keys. There are a bunch of shortcut keys that kind of make things a little bit easier, and I have to say that I'm not current on that. But yeah, it is possible to do that, and that can work really well. Tablets can be good in some cases, but not for everyone. So that's maybe something. Maybe have an experiment with a tablet if you've got one. But if it's not working, then maybe go back to sort of keyboard, and maybe look at larger size keyboards if they are available. Voice activation could be a thing, Hillary, and it is getting better and better. 2 years ago, I definitely wouldn't have recommended voice activation, as maybe that's just because my accent's quite strong. Uh, but yeah, certainly I've used voice activation on my phone recently, and it has actually it's worked out what this strange Yorkshireman is saying. Okay, that's yeah, there you are, Hillary. Yeah, the Yeah, don't always like accents. Uh, that's all from me. Any other points from anyone else, or shall we wrap up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just Kevin, I've got one last thing, and thank you very much, Kevin. That was a really interesting session. Lots of useful, practical ideas coming out of that. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I've just got one last thing I just want to mention to everybody, in that we are setting up a Learn My Way working group, and I know some of you are on it already. Carolyn, I've already got you down, but we're looking to have a group that is focused around sort of future development of Learn My Way, and the idea is that we would meet probably virtually using webinar. Potentially, we may have face-to-face sessions, and we would be covering travel expenses. But the idea is really for us to look at how we develop Learn My Way further. We've got a number of topics already that we're going to be looking into. So one of the first things that we're looking into is interactions on Learn My Way and how we can improve the interactions. And we've got a little pilot project going on at the moment where we're looking at the email course. So we're quite keen to work with you, work with centres yourselves really to understand if our new ways of the sort of travel that we're going in is the right way. Initial assessment is another topic that we're going to be looking at, and that's something that Kevin actually mentioned the other day. I think it was you came to you, you had ideas, didn't you? And you I think so.
Yeah, my
Today's
3 a.m. idea sessions. Yeah, I have a notepad at the side of my bed for that.
Yeah, see, always the best ideas come at 3 o'clock in the morning. Um, Progression is another topic, and then the tutor section. So we've already got a number of topics that we want to start to look at, and we will be kicking off with this in June. So, and the first one probably will be looking at kind of the interaction side of Learn My Way that we've been exploring in the learning team. If you are interested in being part of that group, we really would welcome you, and I'm just pop my email in the chat panel. Let me know if you want to get involved. I can provide more information as well, but yeah, I think it'd be really exciting, and we've got some opportunity to really to continue to that great development of the Learn My Way website. So thank you. So yeah, great stuff. So thank you very much to everybody. Thanks, Kevin. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day. And we'd also just love to hear from you about um, any other topics you'd like to cover in webinars in the future as well. So thank you. I'm just looking at all the chat panels. There's still the chat panels coming, still things coming in.